So those therapists who have more of a holistic approach, who add in the spiritual component, right? Those are the ones that are usually the best. But then also those who got a different level of education, passion, or some of them are just savants at it. Intuitive guides. There's different gifts that different healers have. Then there's shamanistic healing, which is found deeply in African societies and other South American societies, where the shaman would take you through different dimensions. But people out here smoking so much weed, going to therapy every single day. That weed ain't guiding you. The weed is just suppressing. And that's how people are using their tools as suppressions. Let me ask you this. How many people go to therapy? Because there is all of your therapists should be telling you to stop self-medicating. But the therapist is smoking. The therapist is drinking. The therapist is eating bad. Come on now, we ain't even talking about chi and some of that Qigong. You know what I'm talking about? Like Eastern medicine hasn't perfected some practices in the movement of energy and body systems and bandhas over the body. They considered chiropractic pseudoscience for the longest. So it's very important to have an understanding of science yourself if you're going to see a therapist. And now we have AI where you can start researching. It's like when I had a case and I go to my lawyer and I started researching law for myself, and I'm like, yo, why don't we try this in court? And you realize that every lawyer can only obtain so much information about the law at one given time, specifically to the given case that they're dealing with. So it's the same thing with therapists. All of them are not studying psychology day and night. Some of them are taking the tools that they have and generalizing it over a group of people that come in based on different cognitive therapy, skills that they have. So when you go in there, and I ain't saying don't act like you a specialist. I'm saying study in the sense to where you becoming more aware. Study things outside the paradigm, right? Yeah, even Reiki was considered pseudo, and they recently started validating Reiki in science. So when somebody tells me they got ADHD, and it was like, man, you being dismissive. I said, no, I'm not. Maybe I got it. But the difference is I actually studied it. So without having awareness of it, how can you ever heal? So I believe that should be a part of the practice of the patient, that you actually study these things that people diagnose you with. You study the root. You study the father that these things come from. They empower you to have a different level of understanding. Yeah, there's a lot of energy systems, man. And here's the thing. I have a conversation with a black scientist, female scientist, right? And we was talking about how science, and it's funny you say black science. We say, what's black science? Well, I'm talking about the things that are particularly of our interest. Because you also realize that a lot of these studies, they're funded. And so unless they're funded, then there's certain research that don't get out there. And so then there's certain therapies that therapists won't use. But then who are the ones funding the studies? And so we're not funding enough studies, right? So that therapists have a different set of tools to use, specifically holistic and spiritual science. Because if something is wrong with the brain, and that's one thing I like about this doctor that studies the brain. He say therapists are did he say therapists or did he say psychologists? Are the one doctors that don't look at that's what he said. He said they're the one doctors that don't look at the organ that they're actually treating. So when you go to therapy, you're not going to get a brain scan, are you? How many of y'all got a brain scan when you went to your therapist? If you're a neuroscientist, man, go ahead, send me. If you were a scientist, a therapist, send me a DM, send me what you got going on. I want to know. How many people are going to get a brain scan when they go to their therapist? No, we're not doing that, right? So this doctor realized that perhaps it's not just a mental thing. Maybe it's actually a physical thing, right? Because stress can warp the brain, right? This is true. And so when the stress warps the brain, right, sometimes it can cause inflammation. Bad eating can cause inflammation and things of that nature in the brain. And then it means something, trauma can exist in the brain, right? And then that means the brain needs to be treated itself. So then if you go get brain scans, and I believe that we should have the ability in the hood to go get brain scans all throughout America. And then we go look at the pictures of these brains, and then you're going to say, oh, there's a little lump of trauma here, right? There's inflammation here. Then you're able to get a diagnosis, and then you're able to get the tools and the routines and whatever's necessary in order for you to heal that. This is what this doctor did. I'm just telling you his actual studies of thousands of patients. And you realize that, damn, sometimes it's actually a physical condition with the brain and not just a mental thing. So they can be trying to cope for years on something that if they would have focused on actually healing the brain from a physical standpoint. So this is why all of these things are important. All these things are important. I mean, look at us. We have an obese society. That means that 50+% of our society is obese. That means 50+% of our society is sick. And we're not even talking about that enough. You say a smell can trigger a traumatic event. I mean, listen, man. I think we have to be careful about saying things like that. I think you have to realize that you're talking about people with severe cases. See, this is what I mean. You're talking about people with severe cases. Ain't no smell triggering no traumatic event for me, man. That's where the resilience and the capacity to deal with things. You're talking about severe cases, and we have to stop using when we're talking about severe diagnoses on the average person. Because then, it becomes like a placebo effect to where people validate it. And then they say, oh, I smell something and I start tripping. So I think we have to be careful. Some of these languages are for the severe, right? And not the average.